Given the importance of the issue in the Australian public today, I'm going to take you through Australia's housing story, a tale of ambition, struggle, and more recently, a troubling shift toward investment over human need. We'll explore how housing was conceived at colonisation, evolved through emancipation and federation, weathered the world wars, and was shaped by politics post-war, especially through housing commissions and migration. Then, we'll examine the critical shift from the 1980s to today, where bad decisions turned housing into a speculative game, and finally propose some solutions to bring back to its roots as a fundamental right. Let's begin at colonisation in 1788. When the British arrived, they didn't see a housing system to adopt, they saw land to claim. Indigenous Australians lived sustainably, with shelters suited to their environment, but colonisers dismissed this, imposing their own vision. Early settlers built rudimentary huts, often wattle and daub, while the colonial government prioritised grand buildings like Government House over widespread housing. Convicts, who made up much of the population, lived in barracks or tents, with little thought to permanent homes. Housing was a privilege for the free and wealthy, not a right. Rentals didn't exist as we know them. Land was granted or squatted upon, and ownership was tied to status. Emancipation in the 1820s and 30s changed this slightly. As convicts gained freedom, they sought land and homes, often in rural areas. The government began selling Crown land, but it was expensive, and many ex-convicts became tenants of wealthy landowners instead. This marked the start of a rental market, unregulated, precarious, and favouring the elite. Home ownership remained a distant dream for most, as the colony's economy relied on exploitation, not equity. By the mid-19th century, urban slums emerged in Sydney and Melbourne, housing the working poor in squalid conditions, while the prosperous built terrace houses and estates. Before Federation in 1901, housing reflected this divide. State governments had some initiatives, like Victoria's Housing Commission in 1912, but they were small-scale, targeting workers' cottages for rent or sale. Home ownership hovered around 35%, mostly in rural areas, while cities saw overcrowded rentals. Federation didn't immediately shift this, but it laid the groundwork for national coordination. The early 20th century saw suburban sprawl begin, with Californian bungalows symbolising a modest ownership dream. Yet, for the poor, public housing was minimal, and rentals remained a landlord's market. World War I disrupted this slow progress. Construction halted as resources went to the war effort, exacerbating shortages. Returning soldiers faced a housing crisis, prompting the 1919 War Service Homes Scheme. This offered low-interest loans to veterans, boosting home ownership slightly and marking the first major federal housing intervention. Public housing, though, stayed limited. State efforts focused on slum clearance rather than mass provision. World War II magnified these issues. A housing shortage of 300,000 dwellings emerged, compounded by the Depression and war. Post-war, the 1944 Commonwealth Housing Commission declared housing a right for all citizens, recommending massive public investment. The 1945 Commonwealth State Housing Agreement followed, funding states to build public rentals, detached homes and flats for workers and the needy. Between 1945 and 1972, state housing authorities built nearly 100,000 dwellings, lifting home ownership from 40% in 1947 to over 70% by 1960. This golden age saw public housing as a cornerstone, not just welfare, but a pathway to ownership, as tenants could buy their homes under favourable terms. Politics shaped this era profoundly. Labor governments, like Chifley's, prioritised public housing for workers, while Menzies' Liberal government turbocharged ownership. Menzies funded state commissions to build and sell homes, seeing little capitalists as a bulwark against communism. By the 1950s, 15% of new dwellings were public, and New South Wales alone built 38,000 homes. But cracks appeared. Conservative governments later shifted focus, selling off stock and narrowing eligibility to the poorest, not workers. The Whitlam era, 1972 to 75, briefly revived public housing ambitions with urban renewal in places like Glebe, but funding waned post-1975. Now let's fast forward to the 1980s, a turning point. Economic deregulation under Hawke and Keating unleashed credit, fueling a housing boom. Negative gearing, instated in 1985, let investors offset rental losses against income, turbocharging property speculation. Home ownership began slipping from its peak, while rentals soared, yet tenants faced insecurity, with no-fault evictions and rising costs. Public housing, once a pride, declined from 4.7% of stock in 2013 to 4.1% by 2023. Governments sold off valuable estates, like Sydney's Millers Point, prioritising profit over people. By the 2000s, housing was less a home and more an asset. Today, waiting lists hit 163,000 households, homelessness rises, and young Australians are locked out of ownership, with prices far outpacing wages. What went wrong? Bad decisions turned housing into an investment vehicle. Negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts, costing billions annually, favour landlords over first buyers. Public housing investment plummeted. Unlike the post-war 25,000 annual builds, we now add almost none. Planning favoured sprawl and developers, not density or affordability. The result? A crisis where pensioners sleep in cars and rentals are unaffordable even for workers. So what's the way forward? Economist Cameron Murray argues for supply-side reform with a twist. Massively expand public housing, 50,000 homes yearly, sold or rented at cost, not market rates, to crash speculative prices. He'd pair this with scrapping tax breaks like negative gearing, redirecting funds to build, not inflate. The Greens propose a bolder vision, a public housing authority to build 1 million homes over 20 years, rent caps, and ending tax handouts. Think $294 billion from submarines redirected to homes. Labor's current plan, under Albanese, offers 20,000 social homes over 5 years and a Help to Buy scheme, 40% equity for new buyers, but it's modest, barely denting the million home shortfall. My take? Blend these ideas with a post-war spirit. Build 30,000 public homes yearly, rentals and affordable sales for workers and the vulnerable. Recruit 10,000 skilled builders from places like the Philippines, house them in on-site camps, prefabbed, to construct 5,000 of those homes, then let them buy at cost after 3 to 5 years, boosting regional supply. Fund it by axing negative gearing and taxing investment profits. Shift from speculation to stability. Cap rents, and decentralise with regional incentives to ease city pressure. It's ambitious, but history proves it's doable. Housing should be a right, not a roulette wheel. Let's learn from our past, colonisation's neglect, the post-war boom, and the 80s missteps, and build a future where every Australian has a home, not just a dream.